Welcome to the Den of Dissent. This is a show where we challenge the current culture and mainstream talking points of the day. What is the news telling us? What is the culture telling us? Where is our civilization headed? And by what standard do we judge these issues? Do you agree or do you dissent? Let's find out. Welcome back to the Den of Dissent. Today I have special guest John Klyzcek. I hope I'm saying his last name right. John Klyzcek has an MA in English and has taught college rhetoric and research argumentation for over 7 years. His literary scholarship concentrates on the history of global eugenics and Aldous Huxley's dystopic novel, Brave New World. He's a contributor to the Center for Research on Globalization, Op-Ed News, Intrepid Report, Dissident Voice, News with Views, Natural News, Activist Post, Blacklisted News, and The Saker, as well as Unlimited Hangout. He's also the director of writing and editing at Black Freighter Productions Books. In addition, Klyzcek holds a black belt in classical Taekwondo, and he's a certified kickboxing instructor under the International Muay Thai Boxing Association. So he will body slam you intellectually and physically. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rashad.
Thanks for coming on today, man. So let's jump into it. I read your article recently. Actually, I read your article first, and then I got your book. So you recently wrote an article on Unlimited Hangout, Whitney Webb's website. Great journalist. It's titled Trump Ed 2025 School Choice Corporatization, Social Impact Finance, and the Dismantling of the Department of Education. Before we get into that, though, I recently purchased your book. It's called School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education. For those that don't know what technocracy is, how would you define that?
Technocracy is essentially the merger of the two famous totalitarian systems that arose during the First and Second World Wars. So it's essentially a fusion of communism and fascism. Sometimes people might refer to it as techno-fascism. So it basically incorporates the collectivism of communism, of state communism, and the corporatism of fascism. With a high emphasis on technology as the means of organization. So another term that sort of dovetails with technocracy is also communitarianism. So it's essentially the perfect merger of sort of the communist socialist welfare state and the company town, using technology, cybernetics to essentially socially engineer the totalitarian control mechanisms. So, when technocracy as a term, one of the earliest uses of it would be Technocracy, Inc., which was essentially a sort of a fascist-leaning organization. Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, was a member of Technocracy, Inc. before Canada deported him from the country for basically being an enemy of the state, and that's when they moved to South Africa. I recently was looking around the internet. I've heard some discussion that the technocrats at Technocracy, Inc., one of the ideas that they had was to replace currency with energy credits. And so I wanted to find the primary source on that. And apparently there's a Technocracy Inc. website where I don't know who is running it. I just stumbled onto it the other day, but they're republishing a lot of the old literature from Technocracy Inc. And so if anybody wants to look at some of that, you can go there and sort of brush up on it.
Wow. So you brought up Elon Musk. And obviously, he's in the Trump administration playing a huge role. That's going to lead me down a whole different path. That just opened up a can of worms for me, which I'll ask questions on later. But okay. Because I see that in the title of your book, you mentioned technocracy. And so a lot of people, even myself included, weren't necessarily familiar with what it stands for. I wanted to touch on your relationship with Charlotte Iserbyt. You mentioned that she endorsed your book and she wrote the foreword to it, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken. Charlotte Iserbyt, from my research, she was the senior policy advisor in the Office of Educational Research and Involvement. She was part of the U.S. Department of Education during the first term of U.S. President Ronald Reagan. Was she one of your mentors as far as getting involved in the in education and writing your book?
Oh yeah. So everything you see, about 90% of the books you see behind me were hers. So when she passed away in 2022, she gave me her entire library, and she gave me all of her files. So she had 13 file cabinets, was about 36 drawers filled in a barn, which was an old garage that she actually, it was an old barn that she repurposed into a garage and then a guest house attached to it. When I wrote the first article that became the first chapter of the book, in Illinois, we had a governor by the name of Bruce Rauner, and there was a budget crisis. And essentially what I saw him doing was stalling on passing the budget, so that, because when you don't get the public funds out, then essentially he was pushing to get public institutions into private receivership. By the end of that ploy, we had basically a voucher program, which would dovetail with when we get into the nitty gritty of this school choice end of this article. But he was throwing around a lot of the buzzwords that I had heard Charlotte throw around. And so I wrote the article, and she sent me an email. So you got a hold of the article. Thank you so much. I thought it was probably like a virus or a scam or something. I was like, nah, this can't really be her. I was like, well, I'm going to risk it, because if it is her, I can't not risk it. So I opened it. I responded to it on an old computer that didn't have anything else on it, just in case it was a virus. And then we became very good friends. We kept in touch. You know, we had a phone long distance relationship probably from about 2016, maybe before that, maybe a year or so before that, until 2020 during lockdowns. And we were supposed to film for this. Well, we did film for a documentary that never came out. But what happened was we filmed down there, or I filmed part of it down there. They actually came and filmed some of it up here, and they filmed her separately and then wanted to film us together. Mm-hmm. And I spent some time there, and she had a brain bleed. And so she had needed somebody to kind of be around just to, help out around the house. I do, put the snow tires on, replace the storm windows, take the air conditioner in and out, things like that, vacuum, right, take her to the store, things like that. And I spent a whole month with her at one point. It was 30 days from October to November. And she's basically, I guess I'm carrying on her legacy as best as I can. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing, man. It's a big load to carry. From my understanding, she wrote the book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, which I haven't read, but I've seen an interview with her, and she talks about how her father he went to Yale, and he was in Skull and Bones, which has a lot of dark history when you look into the presidents involved and what the fraternity itself was involved in. What did when she handed you her library, what did she tell you as far as her experience, what she saw with Skull and Bones and her father being in that secret society and the research papers that she gave you? What was her, I guess, her big message to you? And what did you take away from all of her papers? Like, if you could give one big impact that it had on you from reading her papers and going through her research.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's a couple things on there, right? So one is the Skull and Bones part, and then the other one is the research part as far as the files. Well, one neat thing I got sitting right here for you too. Actually, they're out just because I had them out for somebody else, and but I figured I'd keep them nearby. So this is the catalog, right? This is the actual catalog for the members of the Order of Skull and Bones that her father was given. And they've been cut because she and her son scanned them. You can get them on, you can get them on my website on the database, but you can also get them on AmericanDeception.com. That's her son Sam's website. and there's links to that through her website, which is deliberatdumbingdown.com. But like I was gonna say, I was gonna shoot your cut, so I can't really open it. I have to kind of take them out, but
right.
You can't really see. I have a document cam that's not hooked up. I should have it hooked up, but one of the things that she noted about the order, and this is something that, so she's the one that sort of the seminal book on the Order of Skull and Bones is the introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones. You might be able to see it back there. So if you look those books back there, you see my book there, the black one with the red letters, that's the abridged version of Deliberate Dumbing Down. The one behind it is Anthony Sutton's Introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones.
I have a copy.
Okay. So you're familiar with Sutton's work on how, and this might be the core takeaway from her research, both in terms of education and in terms of the Order of Skull and Bones, and that is that essentially they play both sides of the field. And this dovetails with the emergence of technocracy. So one of the things that Anthony Sutton wrote about, he worked at the Hoover Institute, and he was doing a series, Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development. And I have all except the third volume back there, which is a rare book and it's extremely expensive. One of these days I'll get it. But what he discovered was that basically the Soviet Union would not have become the formidable opponents that they were had they not been aided by Western banks. And so, he's trying to figure out why would we do that? Right. And when he gets to about the end of his series, writing his series at the Hoover Institute, they basically say, Anthony, don't break your rice bowl. Meaning, they didn't want him to publish some of the stuff he was doing because how it made the U.S. look sort of, complicit or duplicitous in its involvement, with all the Cold War stuff that had been going on. Meanwhile, we're sort of funding them. And then he basically got booted from Hoover as a result, basically ruined his academic credentials. And he had also stumbled onto he wrote another book. So Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. He wrote Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler and Wall Street and FDR. And when he came in contact with Charlotte, he asked her if she could, if he could send her these books, and he did, and she sent them to him. He scanned them, and what he said was this was sort of his aha moment, because he wanted to know who did I upset, right? Who did I make mad that I got booted from academia? And basically what he found was a lot of the people that were funding both sides, right, of the Bolshevik Revolution, basically the communists and the fascists in Nazi Germany, a lot of the same people, or at least overlaps in terms of memberships in the Order of Skull and Bones, popped up. And this is when he sort of dug into the origins of the Order of Skull and Bones, and how their philosophy was deeply rooted in Hegelianism. So Hegelianism is this sort of evolutionary collectivist philosophy. It argues that history evolves or proceeds through this conflict of competing ideas, and that through that clash of ideas, eventually you have a synthesis. This is where Marx gets his idea of dialectical materialism. He just, instead of ideas, he says it's not ideas, but material forces. And it's sort of the left-wing version of Hegelianism. The fascist would become the right-wing version. And so when he traces the Order of Skull and Bones back to essentially there's a secret society in Germany, which is ostensibly connected to the Bavarian Illuminati. I also might have one other neat one for you. This is probably the rarest book that she gave me. This is an original copy of, I don't know if you can see it very well.
Yeah.
Proofs of Conspiracy by John Robeson. Right. So this was the piece that was written when the courier that was carrying the Illuminati papers died on his route, and the hit by lightning or something. Say that again?
I said I think he was hit by lightning or something.
I don't remember how he died, honestly. But that's how we discovered the papers of the Illuminati. And this piece here was written by John. This is an original. I think it's 1770 something. Yeah. He put the sticky notes in it, not me. I would have never put sticky notes in this book. But that's how she just that's sort of where Anthony Sutton traces the roots. And so also underlying this move towards technocracy is sort of a very long sort of occult mission of this idea of Hegelian collectivist evolution sort of dovetails with technological evolution and a concept known as conscious evolution, which is a theosophical term. And all this sort of goes back to, in many ways, if you trace sort of the mythos that a lot of these technocrats believe in, different sort of tributaries, but they all go back to these the sort of the source waters of the mystery schools of the ancient world, going back through Babylon and Acadia and Egypt and Sumeria, etc. And it's sort of the idea that rather than the biblical concept that humanity has fallen after eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge and we're on a path of redemption, that Lucifer, offered the tree of knowledge, the fruit of knowledge, as a means to become our own gods. And it's through this process of knowledge, it's through this mystical knowledge that we are able to evolve science and technology and eventually merge with it and become sort of this new transhuman species. And the technocracy is sort of the instrument of that, bringing in both the left wing and the right wing versions of this Hegelianist philosophy. I should have noted that one other thing one other concept that you and others are probably familiar with that dovetails with technocracy is this concept of stakeholder capitalism, which is built around public-private partnerships. So a lot of times you won't hear, when you hear these policies being put forward, you might hear the buzzword stakeholder or public-private partnership. These are sort of cleaned up euphemisms for different versions of collectivism, whether fascist or communist or communitarian or technocratic, etc.
Okay. Yeah, as far as that book, Proofs of a Conspiracy, I have a copy. I only read, I think, maybe the introduction. I think George Washington had acknowledged in that book that the Illuminati was real, and that I think he mentions the Freemasons and the Illuminati infiltrating different lodges or something like that in the introduction.
Yeah, I think it's a separate book, but he references this book, and he's in. But I know what you're talking about. Yeah, so Washington was aware of it. Yeah, and the long subtitle is something like, should I open it up here?
Ain't that something? We're talking about the Illuminati, and the light goes off in the studio.
Is that what?
Oh, now we're coming. Now it's come back on. Oh, okay, all I had to say was Illuminati, and the light came back on. Okay,
Deluminati. So the full title is "Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All Religions and Government of Europe, Carried On in the Secret Meetings of Freemasons, Illuminati, and Reading Societies, Collected from Good Authorities" by John Robeson, AM, Professor of Natural Philosophy and Secretary of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Third edition. Oh, this is the third, 1798. Okay, so it's not an original, but it's it's almost an original.
Yeah. Wow. Man, it never stops. The first time I heard of Skull and Bones was when I first voted, which was for George W. Bush back in I think the 2000s. That's when after I voted for him, I started finding out about Skull and Bones and his father being involved and all that stuff. And then that's when the rabbit hole just opened up for me. So let's get into your recent article, and then I want to touch on your book a little bit. This article you wrote about Trump Education 2025, and you talk about the school choice, corporatization, social impact finance, and the dismantling of the Department of Education. So Trump has been talking about getting rid of the Department of Education. Now, in your article, you're saying, hold on, pump the brakes. It sounds good to the Patriots. It sounds good to MAGA, the MAGA following. But on the surface, it looks amazing. But when you dig into the roots of what is going on, he's not necessarily dismantling the Department of Education. As a matter of fact, what might happen is that government could expand even larger, because he's once he dismantles it, it's going to be placed in the hands of different bureaucracies, and so that could cause an even bigger department than the original Department of Education. So let's talk about that. You talk about Project 2025 and how people from Project 2025 were involved with authoring these policies. Can you, first of all, some people don't even know what Project 2025 is. Can you touch a little bit on that and why that might be problematic?
Yeah, so Project 2025 is essentially this heritage playbook for the first 180 days of the incoming Donald Trump second administration. That was published maybe 2023, certainly all 2024 it was up, because that's when I started to really pay attention to it, because I was kind of started to see the tides shift. And I probably, I was saying that I thought that Trump was going to win way before a lot of people were convinced, and I would tell them, they'd be like, really? I really think this is, I felt to me like, the more they tried to indict him, etc., the more he just became a martyr. It was not Howard Lutnick. I always get him mixed up. Frank Luntz. I always want to say Lutnick. It was Frank Luntz. Basically said as much, on a few interviews. He's saying, the more you all go after him, the more you make him a martyr, the more people run into his arms. And then after the Butler, Pennsylvania event, right, it was at that point I was like, it's clinched, right? So I started looking at Project 2025, and if you bring it up, especially people that have a lot of hope in Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, they'll say that's a leftist talking point, which, okay, maybe it is. I mean, but whether or not it's a leftist talking point or a right, or whichever angle the talking point is coming from, let's look at the specifics of it, right? I mean, because if we're just gonna do ad homs, I could just say that, well, that's a right wing deflection argument. But if you look at the project, essentially, overall, it's a very big document, okay, and it's looking at what do they want to do with all the different executive departments that are under the president. Overall, if you put it all together, and I haven't read the entire thing word for word, I have read the entire education section. I've skimmed much of the rest of it. A lot of it, if you were to put bookends on it, it sounds like the unitary executive theory, or the unitary executive reestablishment that was to be pushed shortly after the Patriot Act and things like that. So, John Yoo had, one of the lawyers for Bush had made this argument for a unitary executive, right? And an executive, a president that would have more or less unilateral control over the entire executive agency, all these executive agencies, and some of thereby perhaps superseding other checks and balances beyond the executive. So that's sort of the overarching crux of it. I know that he said that he didn't read it. He didn't like it. He didn't want to read it. He didn't believe it, etc. And maybe that's the case. If he, I know that they say that he doesn't like to read a lot. So but if he didn't, maybe he should have, because about close to 30 people at least close to 30 people that were in his first administration, were contributors to Project 2025. Several people that are on the current administration were contributors to Project 2025. These include Russell Vought, who's the head of OMB, John Ratcliffe, who's the head of the CIA, Tom Homan, who is the border czar, Brendan Carr, who is the head of the FCC. Okay, so people that were in his administration before were part of it. People that were in his administration now were part of it. There was people that were contributors to it that were caught in cameras saying that, yeah, he's just pretending like this is actually the game plan. If you look at some of the think tanks behind it, these people are, so just one example, America First Policy Institute, connected to the State Policy Network, which is a consortium of think tanks that are funded by Koch brothers, dark money. Linda McMahon was the chair of the board of America First Policy Institute. We can look at some of these other think tanks and how they're connected to authors of Project 2025. But one of the reasons why I never believed that he didn't know anything about Project 2025 was that Charlotte told me that first day, on day one, if you are part of a Republican presidential administration and you are in any of the executive departments, what you get on day one is a Heritage Foundation playbook. This was the case. She was there. Essentially, the Heritage Foundation is the policy-making arm of the Republican Party, right? They are the think tank that basically rolls out the boilerplate, and then they hand it out to the party, and the party comes up with the propaganda or the rhetoric or the slogans, et cetera, and then the front man or woman to run with that. And the other reason I know that, so that's how it was when she was there. That's how it was, I'm sure, on the first day of Donald Trump's first administration. The reason I say that is because one of the people that was part of the Reagan administration was Council for National Policy member Edwin Meese. And Edwin Meese was also on Trump's transition team for his first term. He's again a heritage guy. So I can almost guarantee, right? I mean, I wasn't there, but I can almost guarantee that same thing happened, same people, same organization, same agenda. So I can't believe that he didn't know that Project 2025 was going to be sort of the menu of options for himself. And yeah. You know, again, if he didn't read it, he probably should have, because that's what they're doing.
Right. So, like you said, it's a leftist talking point, or people say that, that you sound like the left when you talk about Project 2025. Because when I first heard about it, it was through the liberal stations, CNN, MSNBC, and Breakfast Club, and outlets like that. And so I kind of dismissed it. But as I'm reading your article, and you're saying that, and he has distanced himself from it as well. But when I read your article, you're bringing up names that of people that have authored this project. Why do you think that he would want to distance himself from it? If it is a good thing and he is putting people in his cabinet that were responsible for authoring it, what's the big deal? Why would he want to distance himself from it, do you think?
Well, I mean, I would have to deduce that the only conclusion would be that it's not a good thing, right? Right. I mean, this is the man still takes credit for warp speed and is so proud of it, right? So, I mean, and this is something that a very, 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 I mean, if not his entire base, right, is not exactly a fan of. Okay, if he still wants to, toot his own horn about that. This is a man that would take credit for anything that could boost his status, right? So in other words, if Project 2025, if he could take credit for it and say, yeah, I love it, and it would boost his status, he would do it. But the reason why he wouldn't is because it's not. There's nothing conservative about a unitary executive, right? Conservative means to conserve the Constitution, checks and balances, all that type of stuff, right? I remember once upon a time, people in the alt media, which is, especially some of the bigger platforms in the alt media, which we might today call them the alternative mainstream media. And I won't name any particular names. I don't want to put you on a spot, but I remember a time when some of these very popular alternative media outlets would talk about how Obama and Bush did all these executive orders and how that's not right, that executive orders are not the hallmark of a constitutional republic, that the legislative process is, right, that Donald Trump basically has set the record for opening day executive orders, and these same outlets are like, yes, this is awesome, right? So a lot of these outlets also used to warn about, a scenario in which rolling out martial law would sort of be the end game, right? So that right, all these Patriot Act provisions that eventually, right, all of this unitary executive labeling everyone and everything a terrorist would eventually culminate in some kind of a martial law. I heard a lot of these same outlets basically say that he should pulling martial law on various occasions throughout his first term. And so I can only say that true conservatives People that understand what it means to be conservative would not find anything conservative about this project, and that's why he distanced himself from it.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I kind of dismissed the whole Project 2025 talking points, is because I heard it from the left. So I'm like, oh, when is the left? No offense to anybody on the left, but a lot of times there's just so much misinformation coming from the left. So I just automatically dismissed it. But now I'm like, oh man, maybe they were correct with this whole Project 2025, which it just becomes so confusing during these times politically. I don't know, you just got to sift through so much information and, just get past the right left paradigm and just look for truth. Moving on a little bit, you talk about the school choice corporatization in your article with Project 2025 and this whole agenda with Trump Ed. What is school choice corporatization?
Yeah, that's actually how I got started on the book, which started as an article and then turned into several articles and then basically a book. So as I mentioned, Bruce Rauner, he was the governor of Illinois. He's a big charter school proponent. So I should lay out what does the term school choice mean, right? This is one of those like Patriot Act phrases, right? Sounds, if you just read it at the level of diction, it's right. Who doesn't want a choice, right?
School choice, yeah.
So it's a euphemism, though, for a basket of public-private partnerships, right? So we're getting back to this idea of stakeholder capitalism, right? This sort of communitarian corporatism, okay? The first angle of the school choice movement is the charter school movement. So these are private companies that are publicly subsidized with government tax dollars, okay? The charter schooling industry is pretty much ubiquitous now. You probably can't find I know you can't find a state where they don't have them. You probably can't find a county where they don't have at least one charter school. So it's a public-private partnership in the sense that, right, private company that's getting subsidized by public taxes. For those that think that school choice, and we're going to get to the other basket of financial mechanisms that makes up the rest of the school choice movement. But for those that think that school choice is like a right wing or conservative thing, you should know that the concept of charter schools was coined by Albert Shanker, a Democrat who was the president of the American Federation of Teachers Union. The first federal charter school bill was signed by Bill Clinton. And Barack Obama probably did more to proliferate the preponderance of charter schools during his administration by signing up Arne Duncan, who was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools. And in that first chapter of my book, I note that he and Rauner, although right, one's a Democrat, one's a Republican, they quote, talk to each other all the time. And the implication was perhaps that one had called the other to get their child into a particular school, even though they hadn't met the proper requirements. And I can't remember. If you go to the chapter and read it, long time since I've thought about that chapter, but they're chummy. Okay. And so there's been a long history of left-wing organizations involved in this as well. The other angle of school choice is going to be the financial mechanisms. And that's what the emphasis this time around is in Project 2025 in particular. But there's also been many state bills in the last couple of years. I think it was your last year, the year before was referred to as the year of school choice because of how many state legislatures either put forward a bill or passed a bill for some kind of school choice financial mechanism, whether it be a voucher program, an education savings account, or a tax credit program. So in all of these, basically what you're doing is the financial strings attached to these are slightly different, but essentially they all, in each instance, you're either getting money up front that you can then spend on a private school, could be a charter school, could be another public school, but really the emphasis is on, right, that we're going to give these vouchers or these education savings account dollars to families that are in impoverished communities that don't have access to that that are forced to go to a specific public school. And we're going to give them this money and we're going to let them go wherever they want. And sort of the idea is that they'll be able to go to a better school, maybe even a private school. But the case, so in this instance, again, right, you have public dollars subsidizing private schools, but it could also be subsidizing ed tech companies. Okay, so though it seems like the big emphasis this time around is going to be more on the education savings accounts instead of the vouchers. And the education savings account is not a 529 education savings account. That's a separate thing that the IRS does for your own personal with your own personal savings. This is where they're going to take entitlement funds. All right, so public funds that the proposal is there are going to be Title I funds from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And we can talk about what that means, but they're going to be public entitlement funds. And in an education savings account, the vouchers you have to go to a school, and the voucher is going to be registered, right? There's going to be registered schools that can receive vouchers, and then those vouchers are going to be designed for those or stipulated for those specific schools. The education savings account is here's a chunk of money for the family, and you can spend it in any way you want. It could be at another public school. It could be at a charter school. It could be at a private school. It could be at a religious school. It could just be to get some of the products or services in Project 2025 are, quote, curricular materials, quote, education therapies, and, quote, personal tutors. Now, these could be for curricular materials. Maybe it could be textbooks. Okay. But it could also be technology. It could be ed tech stuff. So this is where technocracy comes in, right? So we're subsidizing ed tech corporations, right? That's the corporatization. And then the tech, right? These data mining technologies. This is where the technocracy, sort of the cybernetics, the surveillance capitalism comes in. So the curricular materials could be what are known as adaptive learning courseware. And so these are the digital version of B.F. Skinner's teaching machines. So they basically, they're psychologically conditioning students through what they call operant conditioning algorithms. Okay. And if the student's really smart and really quick, it'll expedite them to the higher learning. If they're not very quick and they aren't very efficient at how they respond, it'll remediate them, right? And so it gets this feedback loop, and then it personalizes their learning, and that'll funnel them into a career pathway that we can talk about a little bit later. Mm-hmm. It might be worth noting that some of the products, companies that utilize or facilitate this type of software would be Clever and Newton, both of which are financed by Peter Thiel, who is sort of the part of the PayPal mafia that Musk was a part of. And he's also, right, his Palantir is deeply entrenched in the government for some time. He's sort of he was referred to as the shadow president behind Trump the first time around. He's the guy that got JD Vance his start in venture capital. So he's sort of invested in this ecosystem. The education therapies, those could be maybe a speech therapist, but they could also be what are known as social emotional learning biofeedback wearables. So these are wearable devices that will data mine students. So they have ones that do EKGs. They have others that do EEGs. So that's heart rate or brain waves. They have a company called HeartMath, which data mines the heart rate, and you can use it they facilitate it. They have some of them actually at the wellness center at one of the schools where I teach. It's to help you manage test anxiety. So you do this breathing exercise, you get yourself into heart coherence to manage your test anxiety. Another could be the brain. There's BrainCo is still a company that does the EEG headbands. Betsy DeVos, who was Trump's first Secretary of Education, she was once invested in, I think she might have even been a trustee or was on the chair of the board, the specific citations in the book. A company called NeuroCore, and had an EEG wearable, and they had these gamified applications. You'd wear it, and it was supposed to help train you to sort of rein in your ADHD. It's to help you manage ADHD. And then the last one, the personal tutors, again, could be a human tutor, but could also be a GPT AI tutor. Could be a product from OpenAI, which they do have, that is designed specifically for tutor. Remember again that Elon Musk was involved in creating OpenAI. Sam Altman, who was also the head of OpenAI at one point, he was tapped by Trump to be part of the Stargate project, along with Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison being a man who financed one of the first virtual online charter schools known as K-12 Inc., which was founded by founding chairman William Bennett, who was the Secretary of Education, following T.H. Bell, who Charlotte was under. So when she leaked, she blew the whistle on this thing called Project BEST, Basic Education Skills Through Technology. It was essentially, it was the laid out sort of the provisions for setting the groundwork for all things fourth industrial revolution, specifically public-private partnerships between Department of Education, other government agencies, specific local and state school boards and districts with big tech companies that would facilitate this operant conditioning, Skinnerian, computerized teaching machines that would condition the students for workforce training. It might be worth also noting one more thing, and then I'll shut my mouth, which is that Khan Academy has a GPT AI, which was trained on Open AI. It's known as Khanmigo, and Elon Musk has funded Khan Academy. So much of the ed tech ecosystem has been financed by the tech bros that are behind Donald Trump.
Wow. Hold on. Man, that was a water hose of information right there. Whole bucket. So let me slow it down a little bit, because the average person is listening to this, and, you know, myself as well, reading the article. When it comes to the schools being funded by tax dollars, you're saying that some of these tax dollars are going towards private corporations or going towards some of these ed tech products, these technology products that are developed by some of these technocrats like Thiel or Musk. So this is what you mean by the public-private partnership.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're funding the technocracy in a sense. The taxpayers are funding it.
Yeah. And so we don't have federal ESAs right now, but we do have federal charter school programs. And some of the charter schools are virtual online charter schools. These were the first sort of digital platforms where you could basically plug in the adaptive learning courseware, right? And so those have been subsidized by federal tax dollars. Probably at least 20 something years, maybe getting close to 30 years now. I think K-12 Inc. was like 2000 or 2001 when it was created. So with the ESAs, then they'll be able to sort of fund even more companies and products, right? That's where they want to go with it. But there's many states right now that are already doing that.
Yeah. Okay. How does, in your article, you also touch on government control? Well, with this new Trump policy, it will enable government control. Here we go with the lights again. Government control over private schools. How does that happen? My goodness. Hold on one second. Okay, there we go. Technocrats keep messing with the light. How does the government gain control over private schools with these new policies?
Yeah. So, with government money comes government regulations. Government never gives blank checks to anybody, right? They're giving you money to make sure that you, at the very least, to make sure you spend it on the thing they gave you to spend it on. But more so, they want to make sure that it's achieving whatever outcomes they want it to achieve. So there's also some, along with the Skinnerian method of operant conditioning, because there is a pedagogy, which is a philosophy of teaching, operant conditioning being the methodology, outcomes-based or competency-based education. They're actually two different pedagogies, but they sort of go together. And for the sake of brevity, we'll just sort of lump them together without explicating the difference. But the idea is that you're conditioning the student to achieve outcomes, right? You're not trying to provide conceptual knowledge so that the student can think creatively and critically on his or her own feet, right? So that they can sort of metacognitively, introspectively look within, right? Use the logic, grammar, logic, rhetoric, right? Law of non-contradiction, et cetera, to sort of make up their own mind and navigate the world from their own volition. It's more about how do we condition the student to meet particularly workforce outcomes, but also what they call citizenship outcomes. So you can sort of break it into two sets of outcomes. One is the workforce training, which is to make sure that they fit all of the basically can, make the gears of the economy, the global economy, the planned economy turn smoothly. And then sort of the citizenship part of it is essentially the politically correct indoctrination, a lot of the woke stuff that we've seen, right? Critical theory, gender ideology, et cetera. We might see a sort of a pseudo emphasis on a sort of I would call it a faux patriotism for a time here as far as the citizenship end works. But as far as, outcome-based education and operating conditioning, this is the aim. Did I get away from the thing that you asked me? I feel like I did.
A little bit. I mean, you touched on it. You said with government money comes some strings attached.
Oh, wait. And then you wanted to know I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. As I mentioned to you, I've been punched in the head many times. My my mind will, I can lose thread sometimes. So how does the strings come attached, right? So in other words, the other reason, so you give the money, the ESAs to the families or the schools, right? And they want to make sure that you meet those outcomes that I just went on and on about. So if you take that ESA, if you're a private school, you're going to be regulated accordingly. So let's just look at one of the state laws that the proposed federal ESAs are based upon, and that is known as Alabama.
When you say ESA, you mean Educational Savings Account, just for the audience.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. Not emergency service animal like ChatGPT thought it was when I put it in the basic search, and then the AI wants to give you the first result. It said emergency service animals, and then under that it was talking about schools. But I digress. The ESAs, yes, the education savings accounts. That money is going to be, if you take that money under the Alabama State Choose Act, you must comply with essentially standardized testing and other, but one of the particulars that's noteworthy is you have to comply with the health codes. Now, a lot of people that have recently jumped on the homeschool or even school choice, maybe even private school sort of bandwagon, a lot of people are people that hadn't thought about it until lockdowns, and they didn't want to get the stabby. And so they took the children out of the public school. Well, if you take the ESAs in Alabama, and we had another such event, you would therefore be required to get the sticky, the jabby. Otherwise, they would take the money back from you. And so that's just one example of how government regulations come with these ESAs. And these, again, for those people that wanted to go to a religious school, right? Because they don't like the woke stuff, right? So they want to go to a school that reflects biblical values. Over time, this could easily encroach upon sort of the curricular freedom to teach from a biblical perspective. And there are historical precedents in Vichy, France, in which one of the first experiments with public funding of private schools and religious schools in particular was in Vichy, France. And then sometime thereafter, the tides turned and you got a left-wing administration in that said, oh, we can't, if you're taking government money, we don't care what you call yourself as far as religious, you are a government school, right? And so the regulations came in at that point. So in some regards, I'm sure they will come with, I haven't found a state yet that has ESAs. There's 13 of them. I haven't looked at one yet that I haven't looked at all of them, but I've looked at quite a few of them that doesn't have some strings attached. But those strings, they can attach more and more strings. And all you need is the first crisis where, whether it be their family or spending money on products that aren't achieving the outcomes, or families are spending money on products that aren't technically authorized, and then they'll come in with more regulations. So this is how you lose. This is how you actually lose school choice. This is how you actually lose educational freedom. This is how you create one system in which it doesn't matter whether it's public or private or charter or religious or homeschool, doesn't matter. All of it is going to be under the umbrella of GovCorp.
Mm. And so if the kids end up becoming smart Christians, that could be a crisis for the government, and that's they would pull their funds. I would imagine. Yeah. You said in the article, well, when it comes to Trump abolishing the Department of Education as recommended by Project 2025, you said it would only reorganize bureaucracies in charge of the schools, so to speak. So, and then you go on to talk about if he was to abolish the Department of Education, it wouldn't necessarily do much, like I just said, because you have all these different acts, and you name these different acts. You name the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the Higher Education Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, and all of those acts would still remain. So the power that the Department of Education had would get transferred to some other departments. Now, someone listening to that might say, okay, John, well, I mean, him abolishing the department might be a step in the right direction. What do you want him to do? That's a good thing, right? So it's like damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, so to speak. What should he then, once he abolishes it, should he then abolish those other acts? And does he even know about those acts?
I mean, I don't know how much breadth of understanding he has as far as the labyrinth of agencies and departments and offices that make up not just education bureaucracy, but I mean, just the entire federal government. I have a database. It's uses a WebBrain software. If people are familiar with Richard Grove's Autonomy University and his Grand Theft World and Tragedy and Hope Media, he has it's essentially the same software. So it's the same design, right? And it's got nodes, hierarchical nodes, and then it's got jump nodes. So it's sort of like a mind map. And I've mapped out much of the education department, but others as well. And I got to tell you, it's a labyrinth. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm learning more and more. So one of the things I left out just in this article, I should have mentioned Carl Perkins' work bill as well, which has other entitlements in it, right? Another bill that would need to be repealed, right? I mean, it was a nice survey that I gave there. So, and I've been looking, very closely at how all these departments and agencies and programs and grants, et cetera, and foundations and nonprofits and how all that works together for a long time. And I still don't think I have the perfect, 3,000 foot bird's eye view. So I can't speak to say how much I would wager he doesn't know the whole map of the territory. I would wager. A step in the right direction. I told that, most people, that was sort of their first, it was some version of that was much of the backlash that I got from the article. And yeah, I mean, you could say that in theory that it's a step in the right direction on paper. But my only thing with it is that so in Project 2025, the reason, first of all, I can stipulate that this is what will happen if they abolish the Department of Education without getting rid of the federal entitlements, just because that's how that works. The Department of Education, all it does is administer and oversee the entitlement funding, right? It regulates it, et cetera, collects a little bit of data to make sure that the entitlements are meeting the outcomes like we discussed. They do have some discretionary block grants that they get to dole out as they see fit. They do a little bit of R&D with like the regional labs, so they can incentivize the adoption of certain pedagogy and methodology by certain, schools of education, certain districts, et cetera. But the bulk of what they do is oversee, administer, and regulate the provisions laid out in the entitlement funds of all the bills that we stipulated. So if you get rid of it and then you didn't move these entitlement programs to other departments, there would be lawsuits immediately. And, we've already saw the Supreme Court rule against some of the executive orders regarding USAID. So there's no way that this is a lot more anchored down than USAID is. I mean, the way these bills, they're older and they're locked in, and it's a large chunk of the budget. Okay. But the other way that we know that that's what's going to happen is that if you look at Project 2025, they say that's what they're going to do. And it says that the bulk of the entitlements are going to go to HHS. Second place is going to be Department of Labor. And then others would include the Department of Justice, Department of Commerce, and Department of State. Now, here's another reason why we know that this is what they're going to do. Because when Linda McMahon, during her confirmation hearing, they asked her, are you going to get rid of the entitlement funding? She says no. I think she says we just want to fund it more efficiently. When they asked her about what are we going to do with the Individuals Disabilities Education Act and the entitlements there, she says, well, I don't know if they wouldn't be better served at HHS. That's exactly where they say they want to put them in Project 2025. When they asked her about, Senator Britt was the one that referred to her as a change agent. That's a whole nother thing that maybe we'll talk about. Charlotte's had a lot to say about change agents, but the other one was Title IX. So they said, if you get rid of the Office for Civil Rights, how are you going to enforce Title IX? She says, well, I don't know if it wouldn't be better served at the Department of Justice. That's exactly where they say they're going to put it in Project 2025. And the other reason that that they're not going to get rid of the entitlements is that one of the wins, I guess you could say, and I could even call this, I guess, at least, I'll call it a consolation prize at best, right? Or the Title IX, right? Getting men out of women's sports. Okay. If you get rid of the entitlements, then his executive order is based on Title IX, redefining male and female as, your biology, basically, right? So if you get rid of Title IX, then that executive order isn't based on, right? The title that it's based on, that basically gives it its authority, would be gone, which would mean that you would lose that consolation prize. You'd lose that win. So if they want to keep that one, and that's one of the few that definitely, when I point out stuff about technocracy and school and public, private, and all this type of stuff, a lot of people they're just happy that it's not DEI. They're just happy that they don't have the DEI programs and things like the woke stuff. The gender, men and women's sports, the gender ID. They're happy that is at least taking somewhat of a backseat. Now, we could get into how much do his executive orders actually stop a lot of that. I don't want to get go into that right yet. But all these are indications that they have no intention of getting rid of the entitlement funds, right? If they did, I don't know why they wouldn't stipulate it, lay it out. She never says that they're going to. And the fact that they're appealing to one of the entitlements suggests that they want to keep them. So all that to say that it would be a step in the right direction if I saw them taking other steps in that direction. I think, honestly, that this is a more efficient system, because I think that what they want to do is all of the so-called academic data that you might gather at the Department of Ed, I think they just want these ed tech products to basically collect that data. And they want to reduce learning outcomes more or less to health outcomes, so mental health, workforce outcomes. So mental health would be HHS. Workforce outcomes, Department of Labor, right? And so essentially you could streamline sort of the entitlement, tracking the outcomes for the entitlement fundings by privatizing, using ed tech, because we're not really worried about academics. We're not really worried about critical creative thinking. We're not worried about grammar, logic, rhetoric. We're not worried about students being able to make up their own minds and, decide whether or not they would like to be conditioned by a product, et cetera. So I think in some ways that also that's Like if we're going to have a federal agency in charge of schools, I prefer it to be one called education, so that at least ostensibly, maybe you might possibly be able to expect that at least some of it is geared towards something closer to academic learning, as opposed to, right, Health and Human Services or Department of Labor. I'd rather not federal agencies controlling education be geared toward labor and health, which are, has nothing to do with traditional academics.
Yeah. Well, the Department of Education is unconstitutional as it is. I mean, when you read the Constitution, it doesn't talk about education or a Department of Education. It's not one of the powers listed. As far as Trump abolishing it, though, if he doesn't know, first of all, this is like a big octopus. There's just so many different tentacles all over the education sector, just in government in general. But if he doesn't know about the fact that this policy would expand the Department of Education or expand government, and he doesn't know about all these different acts, that's problematic because he's the president. He should know. But at the same time, if he does know that abolishing the Department of Education, what he's doing with Project 2025, if he knows that this is just going to further expand it and completely do the opposite of what his base wants, to me, that's very nefarious. And when you bring up the names like Peter Thiel and Larry Ellison, these technocrats that are involved, it shows some of these pieces to the puzzle coming together. So that's just, it's a diabolical, brilliant plan, but it's very nefarious if that is the case. If he does know, either he doesn't know or he does know. Yeah, and both are problematic.
Yeah, and I will say this, that the president cannot know everything about every agency, it's too much. You can't, that's why he has secretaries. And by the way, the secretaries, they don't know so much about what's happening either. And I can tell you this just based on the anecdotal information that I got from Charlotte when she told me the story. It's just anecdotal stories about how the department runs. I mean, the secretary, it's the deputy and the assistant secretaries, which oversee the different offices, that actually do most of the managerial administrative labor. Then you have all the staff, the special advisors, et cetera, like Charlotte, that are like doing sort of the groundwork stuff, right? So the secretary is like, hey, I want you to do X, Y, Z, and you dole these duties out to your deputy and your assistants, and then they go and they tell their staff, and then they run these programs, and then they come back with their data, and then they report to the deputy and the assistant, and the deputy and the assistant reports to the secretary, and then the secretary reports to the president, and then the president says, okay, good, do more of this, do less of that, et cetera. So essentially, at a certain level, the president couldn't, right? I mean, even if they could know most of what all the secretaries know, that's not everything, right? It's just not a comprehensive understanding. And things, especially nowadays, things happen fast, and you have to make decisions, and you have to sign, so you kind of have to defer to your secretaries, which is why it's important to have good cabinet members, secretaries, et cetera. Because this is sort of where, I gave people as much benefit of the doubt with the 4D chess stuff for the first 4 years. I can't do that for the next 8. All right. Like if it's going to be that type of thing again, like it's been too many examples of where I can't, it's like first, like, okay, maybe mistake. After a while, it's like, it's one or two things. If you're not just straight up lying and talking out both sides of your mouth, you're not competent enough to hold to the thing that you think you're trying to do. Either way, you're not the guy that's going to get me the thing I need. But go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, so if that job is being left to the secretaries and the assistant secretaries, and is he hiring the right secretaries or the right people that have the right knowledge about this? Or
that's kind of what, sorry. So no, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's kind of the deep state idea, right? I mean, some of it's more than that because it's the holdover staffers, okay, more than it is the secretaries, et cetera. But it's part of the idea here, right? That he had the first time around everybody working against him, even some of the people he had picked for cabinet secretaries, et cetera. And that's why he had, a few people that kind of went in and out. I will stay in my wheelhouse because, this is what I can speak most confidently to. Linda McMahon is not the right person for the job. I'm sorry. She does have at least a little bit of experience, Connecticut, I believe on one of the boards of education in Connecticut, is been involved in sort of some school choice stuff at America First Policy Institute. But the school choice movement itself. Okay. Betsy DeVos they were basically on the same page with this type of stuff. This is not the person that you want to push an actual conservative agenda. Okay. I can't place any faith in McMahon's what she's going to do. And when we look at the policies that she's promoting, which is, like I said, if you listen to that confirmation hearing, basically everything that she said lined up with Project 2025. And one other thing that was asked of her, which is another good indicator that she's not the person for the job. So this was, in my opinion, the best question that was asked the entire hearing. And this was by Senator Blunt Rochester. She basically asked, if private schools accept ESAs, will they be required to enroll students with disabilities? And because the answer to that question is the answer to, will these federal ESAs come with federal government regulations? Because, right, some private schools don't necessarily have to take people with disabilities, right? And she basically filibustered and danced around it. And Blunt Rochester says, well, I have other questions I need to ask. It's a yes or no question. She says, well, it's not a yes or no question. And she goes, well, I don't have time for the long question. Please, you can write your response to this question and mail that, send that to me. For the rest of this hearing, we're going to move on to the next question. So in other words, if it was no, it would have been no. So if it's dancing around it, I think it's yes. Right. And it has to be yes, because again, they'll be sued. Right. And I don't care whether you're on the right or the left. If somebody's taking government money, they probably should be required to take people with disabilities, right? Because it's a public dollar, so it should be for everybody, right? And so that's kind of the nature of, in some ways, if you do give government money, you kind of, in some ways, I would be, especially for Title I funds, there was a way to just give people money and not have strings attached. I'm not necessarily against that, right? But that's just not how government works. It's never how it has, right? And so everything that this woman has said and indicated is to the opposite. And one other thing that she was referred to as was a change agent by Senator Britt. They're like, we need a change agent in education. Linda McMahon is a change agent. Change agent. Are you familiar with the term?
I've heard the term before, but you can elaborate.
Largely popularized in like the Saul Alinsky circles. So a change agent is somebody that essentially infiltrates an institution, pretends to represent the values of that institution, and subverts it from the inside out. And Charlotte, her first introduction to change agents was when she got this book. You should probably be able to read that. Change Agents Guide to Innovation in Education. Okay. And this was, so Charlotte, a lot of people don't know that she actually spent, before she worked in the Department of Education, she was part of the State Department. And she was in Middle Eastern affairs and she was in Soviet affairs. So she spent a long time overseas throughout the 50s. I think she came back 70s. I think 70s was when she definitely started doing school board activism. So maybe it's late 60s, early 70s when she finally comes back from her State Department tour. She'd done some Red Cross stuff as well, but the end of the stint was the State Department. And she comes back and, she said she went to a school board meeting and there was a conversation about what should the kids be learning. And she said something like, oh, well, I think they should, learn good values and, reading, writing, arithmetic, and she said, good values or something like that. And everybody goes, whose values? And she's like, what? I thought this was America. I thought we all believed in the Constitution and we're for the most part a Christian nation, right? And she was shocked to, that what she said was the most sort of taboo thing that the way people responded. So somebody that was there said, you're onto something, but you don't know quite what you're really fully on to. And she's like, I'm going to pay for you to take this change agent training. And so this book, this is the book this is the actual book that she bought at the thing. And what it teaches them is, here, I'll just show you one of the diagrams. There's all sorts of diagrams in here. I'm trying to keep my bookmarks in here without dropping them. Okay. But they got all sorts. I don't know how good you can see the text, but it's like what you see is like what you might call group dynamics or systems dynamics. And it's showing how to basically how to play off, how to isolate what they call the resistors, how to use peer pressure and group dynamics to get people to play along with the agenda, etc. But it's a dense thing on specifically how to psychologically isolate the resistors and galvanize the group towards this change in values and this change in the institution. And this is the term that was given, that was referred to, or that Senator Britt referred to Linda McMahon with. So I don't know. Senator Britt's a new senator, relatively. Maybe she doesn't know the baggage that comes with that term, but in the conservative circles that Charlotte ran in, that was never a positive thing to be a change agent. So, right,
that's interesting. I also wanted to touch on when you talked about in the article social impact investing. So you mentioned how with this Project 2025 new form of education coming in, that it could lead to social impact in investing and the commodification of children. And what I took away from that was that children are being looked at as commodities and investments. And so you can invest in a child, and if they do well, it's like a stock. The stock price goes up according to or depending on how well in school that child does. Can you touch on the social impact investing and the commodification?
Yeah, I think that was a nice way to encapsulate it, because one of the terms that's used sometimes so impact investing is kind of an umbrella term, and there's different types, again, financial mechanisms. There are nuances, differences in how the mechanisms work, but sometimes I wonder if they do, with the ESAs and the vouchers, if they, in the what they call pay for success or social impact bonds or human capital bonds. It's almost like, I think it's, if you, instead of just putting everything under one term, it makes it harder to follow and for people to conceptualize, right? And they might think that these are different things. They don't have anything to do with each other, but they do, right? And so one of the most prominent versions of impact investing is called the social impact bond, right? So essentially, right, creating a bond for the investment in the human capital that is the student based on whatever economic, workforce, healthcare, recidivism, et cetera, outcomes you could produce. So in the realm of education, the impact investments are largely known as pay for success. There are provisions for pay for success in the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the latest federal bill governing education. So the way a pay for success impact investment works is the impact part is what is the outcome that you want to achieve, right? And so these are usually going to be social, and that can mean a number of different like social credit metrics. So it could be like workforce outcomes, it could be healthcare outcomes, it could be reducing the students who are at risk from becoming delinquents. So basically a criminal justice kind of component to it. But then they can also have, right, within that social credit sort of milieu, the broader metrics of what are known as ESG outcomes. So environmental, social, and governance outcomes. So these are basically corporate social credit. But as far as the S part, right, the social part, this is basically your DEI part, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so as far as the DEI part, some of the impact investments might also emphasize outcomes that improve any of those particular outcomes that we just laid out for specific populations, right? Whether they be there's an impact investing scholarship granting organization known as Point Foundation, and they emphasize outcomes for LGBTQ BIPOC communities. Okay. Now, the way that the pay for success impact investment would be streamlined through the school choice provisions that are being put forward in Project 2025 would be through something called the ECCA. I think it's Educating Children for Choice Act. And this is sort of the other side of the school choice coin for Project 2025. So the first one is the Title I education savings accounts. And the other one is the ECCA. And this one's going to give tax credits to donations to scholarship granting organizations. Now, those donations can be from individuals or they can be from corporations. If the average taxpayer had enough money to invest in and get a tax credit and invest in their own child's learning, probably wouldn't need the tax credit to begin with. So the bulk of that's going to come from very wealthy donors and corporations. Okay. So those corporations give money to what's known as a scholarship granting organization, which is itself a nonprofit organization. And then that nonprofit organization can give its scholarship monies to whomever it wants based on whatever provisions it wants. So unlike the education savings accounts, where you look at the state laws upon which they are based, where they all stipulate some kind of federal regulatory process, right? We looked at the example of the health code stuff. The other side of this, the ECCA tax credits, these are set where the government cannot regulate the SGOs, and they can give to whoever they want based on whatever they want. Now, maybe that, hopefully, maybe some of them or enough of them, or at least some of them, right, are going to be going to some of the types of schools that people who really think school choice is going to be this beacon of freedom, especially for going to help you get into your religious or parochial school so you can get your biblical education, and you might not have the money for. Maybe there will be some SGOs that do that, but there are many SGOs that already exist that are geared towards impact investment, and some of which, as I noted, the Point Foundation, right, which are basically leaning towards what we would otherwise call left-wing or woke ESG social credit metrics, right? And there's nothing preventing the companies from doing that. And I think that'll be, that's part of the, it's free market, we're free market people. But if you think that Trump basically has gotten rid of all the DEI stuff with his executive orders, you should know that most of those executive orders, all they do is rescind other DEI provisions in other executive orders. They do not rescind DEI provisions in such bills as the Every Student Succeeds Act, including the DEI provisions that are associated with the pay for success impact investing in that bill. Okay. And then, even the ones that are, again, even the executive orders that he stipulated that are geared towards the Department of Education, right? They again would have to repeal the ESSA and some of these other bills that we laid out as well to actually ban all forms of DEI stuff. Now, even if, right, let's say that, they're able to roll that back, or maybe just culturally it becomes not that popular. You should know that there are sort of right-wing versions of impact investments that largely just they sort of leave out sort of the woke sociocultural outcomes. They're just going to focus on socioeconomic outcomes, basically workforce development, workforce training. And so some of these organizations include the American Enterprise Institute, EdChoice, which used to be known as the Milton and Rose Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice, the Heritage Foundation, which we noted is the main author of Project 2025. And then the Charles Koch Foundation. All of these think tanks are part of the State Policy Network, which is, a consortium of think tanks funded by dark money from the Koch brothers. And it's worth noting here that several of the authors of Project 2025 are affiliates or associates or fellows or otherwise work for these think tanks. So Max Eden, is associated with, I can't remember the particular roles. I mean, they're, like I said, fellows, etc. Max Eden is at American Enterprise Institute. He wrote specifically a piece about impact investing for school choice. You have Lindsay M. Burke, who is the main author of the Project 2025 Department of Education section. She is at Ed Choice. She's also at Heritage. Then you have Jonathan Butcher. He's also at Heritage. And so basically all of the think tanks that are associated with Project 2025, well, either the advisory board or its authors, many of them are also invested or leaning into the impact investing part. So whether it'll have, how much will the DEI play a part? You know, there'll probably be a mixed basket. But on both ends of the spectrum, left and right, that's sort of the way things are primed.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack. I know I'm sure you have some things to do. There's a few other questions I want to ask you before we wrap up. In this article, you also talk about the fourth industrial revolution and the social credit system. How does that tie in to this whole Project 2025 education system and Trump's new education policies?
Yeah, so the fourth industrial revolution.
What is the fourth industrial revolution for people who don't know?
Yeah, so the fourth industrial revolution is essentially this emerging digital industrial revolution, which Klaus Schwab, chairman of the World Economic Forum, says will fuse our biological, our physical, and our digital identity. So we've had several industrial revolutions over the last several hundred years, moving from sort of the mechanical to the combustion steam engine into the electrical and now digital. Right. And with this digital economy is going to come what they call disruptive technologies. A disruptive technology is one that basically upends an entire industry. Right. So it makes things obsolete because you come up with this new machine or product that basically can automate or otherwise replace the older methods of labor, etc. So along with these disruptive technologies also comes sort of an emerging social order, and tied in with it is going to be sort of stakeholder capitalism and sustainable development. So there was you and your audience are probably familiar with the Great Reset, and the Great Reset is was launched, announced. Was it 2020? I believe it was mid 2020. Shortly after lockdowns, there's a book, COVID-19. Oops, are we on YouTube? I hope I didn't just hit the algorithm for it. He wrote, well, it's a title of a book. That should be okay. That should be fair, right? But that word in the Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. And basically they wanted to use the lockdowns to sort of usher in what they were calling the new normal. And that meant, right, we were going to basically digitize as much of the economy as possible, that we were going to emphasize public-private partnerships between corporations and governments and within community organizations that would adopt these new technologies in order to create this new stakeholder system that would sort of streamline supply chains for what they call sustainable development. Most of this you might think of as like green, technologies, right? With a heavy emphasis on population, resources, environment. But actually the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are sort of adopted or revamped from what were called the Millennium Development Goals. And in the Millennium Development Goals, sustainable development was just one of the goals. So they took that and they just made that the overarching umbrella term, but all the other provisions for like, alleviating poverty and things like that are also encompassed in it. And there is one, they have one of the SDGs, I believe it's SDG 4 that emphasizes education, and there's different provisions for education, some of which emphasize like using the buzzword stakeholders and public and private partnerships, with an emphasis on technology and educating people for global citizenship. So also what comes along with this is sort of a new global economy, right? That this digital infrastructure is supposed to enable a global economy. And so when Klaus Schwab is talking about fusing your physical, biological, and digital identities, some of what he's talking about is a term called transhumanism, which is kind of toward the end goal and the apex of a technocracy. So technocracy means government by technology. So it's this ubiquitous cybernetic system in which every aspect of your life is managed, controlled, and data mined by an array of various technologies, whether they be ubiquitous screen technologies or some of the wearables we talked about, or eventually brain-computer interfaces like the Neuralink that Elon Musk is developing. Is probably getting close to being commercial soon. But the other part of fusing the biological, the physical, and the digital identity is essentially aggregating all the data that you could extrapolate from all the devices, from all your online activity, from everything that you do, from your Fitbits to your dashboard at your job, on your whatever. If I have to use a learning management system, et cetera. All that stuff is going to create this psychological profile, a biopsychosocial profile. And that is going to determine whether or not you have access to the public square of commercial services. So, a good example would be like in China, the social credit system in China is that if you want a peek at what it would look like, there's a nice documentary. Is it Journeyman TV? I think it's Journeyman TV. There's a couple of them, but that's one of the better ones where they sort of do a couple profile case studies of people that live there, and it's ubiquitous AI stuff, facial recognition cameras everywhere, et cetera. And all this bio data, all this psycho data basically is going to determine whether or not you can have healthcare, transportation, a job, you get to go to school, et cetera. It can also make things cost more, right? So if you, if your social credit score is like super low or something like that, or maybe you got 2 demerits because you ate too many cheeseburgers this week, right? So now if you want a 5th cheeseburger, this one's going to cost 5 times what the other ones cost, this type of thing. And the ed tech data is just part of that ecosystem, right? So you're going to see similar things in all the other sort of domains of society. So you'll have sort of health tech, electronic health records, all the stuff that I mentioned, like the heart rate monitors, and that can be used for healthcare stuff as well. They've got stuff called bossware for jobs where it's the same thing. And some of them are ear pods, but they data mine the brainwaves, and they'll have trackers on the mouse and the keyboard. So they know what keys you're clicking, how frequently you're clicking them, whether or not you're clicking the mouse, whether or not you're actually paying attention to the screen, or maybe watching Facebook because it's going to data mine your. So they've got that for just, managing the workforce. They got it for healthcare. They've got it for,
I said they need to call that slavery tech.
Yeah. Well, look, here's another one. Now they got one. And I wrote about this in my book. They were some pilots back in the day, but apparently they're doing this. I just read it on the plane. What was it? VR for so when they put people in solitary confinement now, instead of putting them in just locking them in the hole, you can have a VR session that's going to be therapeutic. They do some artwork afterwards, and they try to put you in these VR scenarios where they try to trigger, I don't know, if you're in there for assault, maybe they put you in scenarios where you might lose your temper, and then you're supposed to try to so anyways. Another example is the criminal justice aspect, where these devices are going to be used to data mine and determine whether or not you're allowed to participate in society.
Unbelievable. This is part of the brave new world. Few questions just to wrap up. So since you mentioned the 4th Industrial Revolution and how that just implements this whole technocratic control system, Trump has hired Musk, who is, according to what I've seen, seems like a technocrat, obviously. You talk about Peter Thiel and Larry Ellison, which also have their hands in the technocracy pot of stew. It seems like, is this what you're saying? This is how the fourth industrial revolution influence will be implemented in the Trump administration? Will it be implemented through these gentlemen? I don't know. Should I say gentlemen? Through these men?
Yeah. I just want to. I always get it mixed up. I'm double checking here. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So one example, Peter Thiel's a good example. I mean, I just noted to you that, right, Elon Musk's granddaddy was literally part of Technocracy Inc. So he's a technocrat in the most literal sense of the term, or at least his granddaddy was. I mean, you can't be held accountable for what grandpa did, but really does seem to be doing the same things, right? And if you think of social credit, remember what I mentioned about the Technocracy plan to create energy credits, to have money instead of have it be a currency, a coin, a token, whether fiat, etc. It would be an energy credit, and this would be based on some sort of algorithm that's, it's basically social credit, right? I mean, if you think about, right, your ability, your purchasing power is being associated with or attached your behavioral data, your bio data, in terms of how it's correlated to the outcomes in the economy, whether or not you're doing the things they want you to do to get the economy to sort of move and flow in the direction that it flows. For Peter Thiel, so he was the speechwriter for Bill Bennett. And Bill Bennett was, as I just mentioned, he was the Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan. He took over the mantle of Project Best after T.H. Bell. By the way, he's another Heritage Foundation guy. Okay, he was also part of the associated with the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is also part of Project 2025. So Peter Thiel was a speechwriter for him, but he also founded this. I always want to say Princeton. It's Stanford. I don't know why I always do it. Stanford Review. Okay, which is basically, the flagship conservative magazine at Stanford. It was basically the premier conservative magazine, and there wasn't much of a conservative, presence on campus. So what you have is Peter Thiel. This is going way back. He's been involved not just in creating the technologies, right? This PayPal mafia guy, fintech. And by the way, we could note that this is the next article I'm working on. A little preview for you and your audience. What I've also stumbled upon is that they want to use fintech to administer the ESAs. All right. Things like Class Wallet and Odyssey, some of which are funded by Andreessen Horowitz. So that's Mark Andreessen. He's another guy that's in the Thiel sphere. Okay. Some of the other venture capital firms, I can't remember the names of them off the top, but some of them that were funding, I think it was Odyssey. It was either Odyssey or Class Wallet. That they in their portfolio is also Palantir. All right. So Peter Thiel and Palantir, and Musk too, right? They've been funding and developing and building the edtech infrastructure for all this fourth industrial revolution, surveillance capitalism, technocracy, etc. But he's also been involved in basically sort of drumming up the culture war stuff from the right wing angle. Okay. Another way you can see this is these guys are kind of the tech bros. They are not your traditional conservative. So what we're seeing here is kind of the merger of the kind of the libertarianish, we'll call it the Beltway libertarian arm of the right wing, merged with the sort of old school neocon arm of the Heritage Foundation, Koch brothers network, etc. They use the term libertarian. It's, I'm more libertarian than anything. But I'm libertarian, little L. I don't believe that everything should be privatized, because then what happens is the company becomes a de facto state with no obligations to have any sort of deference to the public, their term stakeholders, right? You just have a company and it's like take it or leave it, right? So at least with the public, you have some kind of a civil process, right? But people like the Koch brothers at the Cato Institute, which, by the way, Cato associated with Project 2025, one of the authors of the education section, Andrew Gillen, is at Cato. But the Cato Institute, the Austrian economists, Mises, Hayek, etc., Murray, Murray broke with them because what they were into was public-private partnerships, which is not by any definition of the term, whether you're objectivist or whatever your ANCAP, whatever your flavor of libertarianism is, public-private partnerships doesn't fit, right? And so what you have in Thiel is a man who has been, I think, playing the long game, drumming up using the right-wing culture war part to funnel support for this new fake libertarian. Essentially, it's a techno-fascist regime under the guise of this MAGA movement. And
okay,
yeah.
Earlier, you mentioned Peter Thiel in the article as well. Peter Thiel being Trump's shadow president. Some people don't know who Peter Thiel is. Why is Peter Thiel a problem necessarily in the Trump administration? And if you could give like a brief summary on who he is, what he's tied into, what would you say about him?
Yeah, so we sort of noted. I just realized when you said that I didn't note that he's a member of the Bilderberg group in that article, did I? Almost every time I write about him, I always say that, and I think I left that out. But that's one thing we could note. He's on the steering committee of the Bilderberg group. So if people don't know what the Bilderberg group is, there are a range. I'll go ahead and just throw it out there. There are these things called roundtable organizations. They're NGOs. One of the first that was set up was called Milner's Roundtable Organizations. Shortly, the people that set up from thereafter, the Council on Foreign Relations, Royal Institute of International Affairs, the people like Lord Milner and sort of the Rhodes Society connected to that. They created these international roundtable NGOs to sort of bring together sort of all the heads of state, heads of companies, media people, to get together and privately discuss ways that they could, re-engineer or carve up the map to create essentially a global order. And these were the same people that were involved in setting up the League of Nations. Over time, you get the emergence of other roundtable organizations. So after the CFR and the RIIA, the next in line would be the Bilderberg Group, which comes shortly after World War II. This is sometimes referred to as like the apex or the head of all the globalist roundtable organizations, but others would also include the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, and as we noted, the World Economic Forum. But these are all the same types of organizations where, they bring together heads of state. Sometimes they brought religious leaders, the business CEOs, et cetera. And these people all get together to figure out how to expand their public-private stakeholder global economy. Okay, so Peter Thiel is on the steering committee there. He runs a company called Palantir. Palantir has got all kinds of government contracts. Essentially, what they do is predictive analytics. So it would essentially be the perfect company to facilitate a social credit system. They do stuff for policing. So basically predictive policing algorithms, largely. I think they might have been working with border security stuff, national security stuff. My memory serves me correctly. In my chapter in my book, this precise breakdown should be there. I believe they also were partnering with like local police departments for doing some kinds of predictive analytics, maybe for red flag laws or something like that. So he's into that. He's part of the PayPal mafia. So he's one of the people that founded PayPal. He's been one of the lead investors in many big tech companies. Meta is one of them when it was Facebook and before it was Meta. I should also note that he met privately with Secretary DeVos when she was Secretary of Ed. There's a FOIA request that I have cited in my book that lays that out. So he's also been connected to both of the two secretaries of education, while also financing the ed tech end of sort of the technocratic panopticon. As we mentioned, invested in some of those products as well. He's also a guy that has spoken out very much against universal education. So he's somebody that doesn't really think that everybody should go to school. He thinks that a lot of people should go straight into the workforce. And so that's another reason why I think he's on board with, because these apps, I don't want to open up another can, but a lot of them could be part of what they call micro-credentialing programs. So like, not necessarily like an associate's degree, maybe even shorter than that, but a lot of community colleges will offer non-credit bearing programs where you get a certificate. Like one of the schools where I teach, you can get a paralegal certificate. I thought about doing that at one point, but never got around. So more training like that. So he's sort of geared towards disrupting the economy with technology. But that's sort of his back. He grew up in South Africa. He's also, he's an open homosexual. I think he's married to a man. And
okay, also, I think I did hear about that.
Yeah, and he also uses it's called parabiosis. So he takes the blood of young folk and he puts it in he gets IVs because it's supposed to help you stay young or something like that. So in other words, and he's one of these guys that's interested in the life extension stuff. He's, he'd be close to Larry Ellison as far as that camp goes.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot more. There was something called Operation Tiberius Kirk when they were giving out the stickies for lockdowns. He had contracts to track a lot of that data as far as who was getting the stickies and things like that. So that's a good overview.
Yeah, that was a good summary. I got to read that article that Whitney Webb did on him.
Oh, there's a couple. One more thing I should know real quick is that his Palantir, the name of the company, it's a reference to I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's in The Lord of the Rings, and it's either like a crystal ball or some magical thing that can like see either the future or can peer out into the lands and core. So he's naming his company after something that has sort of occult or magical connotations, which gets us back to what I was suggesting about sort of the new age theosophical conscious, all that stuff underneath the surface of just the economics and the politics of it.
Right. And this is where I kind of want to wrap this interview up with a nice, pretty bow. I have a few quick questions before we do that. So touching on the spiritual aspect, that was my next question. Who do these people worship? Like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who and Linda McMahon, if she is a change agent, who are they at their core, would you say? And what religions do they follow? If you could point a finger.
Well, I would say, I would, and this, I'm going to infer something based on some of the language that they use. Because I don't know that any of them has explicitly claimed any religion. They might be sort of leaning into the some of the Christian ethos, just because, right, that's the cultural wave they need to ride at this time. So they might call themselves cultural Christians, which a lot of people are doing now that want to be on the right wing bandwagon and get the government contracts, etc. I think also you just reminded me that if I remember correctly, Thiel, some of his venture capital from, I think, were invested in some of like the Halo app, right? That prayer app. So it's just interesting that some of the what kind of data you could get from watching Christians talk to each other on their apps. You might be able to figure out what are some of the buzzwords that might help you get these people to support your candidate, right? But I would say they're conscious evolutionaries. So if people want to read my series on Barbara Marx Hubbard at Unlimited, hang on. There's one more piece I need to finish, but it's is it a 4-part or a 3-part right now? I think it's three parts right now. But one of the main, she pushes something called conscious evolution. And I sort of laid out some of it earlier today. It's essentially a theosophical term. The theosophical people like Alice Bailey would have talked about it. They would have had an explicit emphasis on the esoteric, on the mystery schools, right? And the New Age broadly does, Barbara Marx Hubbard being a prominent New Ager. But in modern sort of manifestations, there's two threads that overlap kind of like a Venn diagram, but there's people on the outskirts of either end of it that might not totally be aware of the center line, and they might even look at each other like they think they're on different ends of the spectrum. But some of them emphasize more the scientific part of it, the quantum mechanics, the technological evolution, the transhumanism, and things like that. And this is sort of, right, we are using our consciousness, right, our minds to create these technologies that we can then merge with to enhance our minds, to create what she calls the global brain. A lot of these people, there's a Hoover Institute interview where Thiel is being interviewed. I think it was like last year. And he's talking largely about like averting the end times, basically saying that we don't have, like, that we can change the book of Revelation through conscious evolution, that we're hitting this flashpoint where either our technology will destroy us or we will transcend and become, right, the new God species, right, the Ubermensch or the new Soviet man, or, all the new age, new man, all the different terms that have been used to sort of describe this conscious evolutionary process. For Thiel, if you watch that Hoover Institute interview, you can pick up some of sort of the I don't know if dog whistles is the right word, but he's using the language without saying conscious evolution. He's talking about largely the same eschatology, I guess, that would go along with that. And Musk on the same end, he had the Baphomet suit, right?
Right, and, upside down cross.
He also, if you look at, there's some graphics that sort of lay out what his Starlink satellite grid looks like over the planet, and it kind of looks like a buckyball. So a buckyball is the colloquial term for what's known as a geodesic dome. So the Buckminster Fuller, one of Barbara Marx Hubbard's colleagues, was it's kind of like a proto sustainable green engineer, right, architect. So the geodesic domes are like, they used to do them at Epcot Center a lot. They probably still have them, but it's a series of either triangles or hexagons that create a dome, right? Mm-hmm. And the nodes on those different triangles or hexagons are sort of in the graphic for the Starlink satellite grid. The nodes where those geometric shapes connect are the satellites. Now, when there's a concept known as the noosphere in the realm of the esoteric arm of New Age conscious evolution, and this is a concept that was created by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He was this Jesuit priest who was also a eugenicist, by the way. He's friends with Julian Huxley, who was president of the British Eugenics Society, first director general of UNESCO, brother of Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. But Pierre Teilhard de Chardin believed that the nous, right, the mind, so it's a concept that was created by pre-Socratic philosopher known as Anaxagoras, right? And then basically they believe that like the mind is a type of like energy or spirit or force, okay? And it is expressed, so the nous of the universe came to know itself, came to be conscious of itself through the mind of the human being. So first it creates matter and energy, eventually creates the biosphere, the life sphere. And then out of that comes a noosphere, because the mind of the apex of the biosphere being the human mind. This is where we get into Luciferianism, because this is at the bottom of it. Alice Bailey, who came up with, right, she's the one that basically coined conscious evolution. One of her predecessors, Blavatsky, used similar terms, but not exactly that term. But her company, the Lucius Trust, Lucius Publishing, was once called Lucifer Trust, right? Lucifer Publishing Company. It contracts partners with the United Nations and other offshoots known as the Goodwill, or was it World Goodwill? And it also connects partners with the United Nations. Okay. But right, Lucifer, right, is going to give us the knowledge, right, the fruit of knowledge. And that's going to enable, right, the nous of the mind to create science and technology. And then the technology basically becomes like this idol that we worship. I mean, it really becomes an idol that we worship if it becomes this AI god that some of these people, like the way of the future Church of Artificial Intelligence, want to make it. Yeah. And so at that point, then, right, the noosphere, we connect through the devices, through those. And this is Elon Musk. This is a man who has the Starlink satellites to connect everybody. He's got the social media, which Barbara Marx Hubbard refers to as, she says that this is our collective global nervous system. That all, and she's talking specifically mentions Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, etc. That this is like our extended noospheric nervous system. And so through the aggregate of technologies that somebody like Elon Musk has, a brain chip, a social media company that basically can data mine everything, especially once if we're wearing the brain chips, you'd have a direct link between your bio, your neurology, your neural algorithms, your social media inputs linked up to his Starlink that would be distributed across that noosphere grid, which looks exactly like other models of Desjardins' theory of like this omega point, the conscious evolution of the noosphere. So I would say that that is their religion. And if you really want it, they might call it, again, on one end of it, they might just emphasize the transhumanism, the technology, and the evolution part and the consciousness part. But on the other end, they will, the mythos of it is Luciferian. And so they might not say Luciferian. They might just play with terms that are in the realm of the discourse of conscious evolution. But if you trace back the history of the terms, right, that's what it is. Yeah. Well, it sounds like the beast system. Oh, you're muted, brother. Yeah. Or I can't hear you anyways. I don't know if you're muted. Am I muted? Can you hear me? Yeah, John. So we got cut off. And my last question for you was whether or not Trump is aware of the worldviews and philosophies of those that he's surrounded with, like Elon Musk, Paula White, Peter Thiel, and you were going into some detail about that.
Yeah. So as far as, the technocratic angle, as far as the technocrats behind him, how much is he potentially aware of that? Well, one interesting thing to note is that, well, Elon Musk, his either his uncle or his grandfather was a member of Technocracy Inc., which is basically this sort of a fascist movement during World War II, but they wanted to emphasize sort of a techno-fascism. So instead of a corporate fascism, just sort of refining the corporate part with technology industries that could sort of micromanage life. But Musk is also, right, he runs the Tesla Corporation. I don't know if you're aware of this, but when the actual Nikola Tesla died, it was Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, who's an MIT professor, who was given exclusive access to Tesla's papers. So, I mean, it's just kind of interesting that, both Musk's and both Trump's relatives, older relatives, sort of have ties to, well, technocracy, but also to sort of the Tesla brand name, I guess you might say. So it's just kind of interesting that those two things come together. As far as, sort of more the new age angle, I mean, we can kind of dovetail from here just by looking at, I mean, Musk's, there's graphics out there. A friend of mine, Michael O'Fallon, did a good presentation on this, demonstrating that, showed some graphics that illustrate the Starlink satellite grid basically mirrors other depictions of Teilhard de Chardin's noosphere. And this is basically this idea of basically the intelligence of the universe sort of manifesting itself through our technology, by which we will sort of merge with it. And he shows that sort of this grid of the cybernetic sort of what Barbara Marx Hubbard called the cybernetic nervous system of the conscious evolutionary human species, that it sort of mirrors this the Starlink grid, which also kind of looks like a buckyball, basically a geodesic dome. Has its roots in other sort of new age proto-sustainable development architecture, etc. But Musk also was wearing that Baphomet costume. I think it was on Halloween one year. So I mean, he's at least plays with the symbolism. Is Trump, how aware is he of this? It's kind of hard to say sometimes, because he. I think it's a savvy rhetorical move. I think he pretends like he doesn't know things that he knows for the sake of being able to play both sides of the field quite often. But insofar as like specifically him, like how much is he into like maybe the new age stuff? Well, he said on several occasions that basically his favorite pastor was basically the family pastor was Norman Vincent Peale. Norman Vincent Peale is the author of Power Positive Thinking. So positive thinking being one of the modalities in the new age, sort of along the line of manifesting, right? And so using in some branches of the new age, you might have something like a mandala or a vision board or something, and you channel or manifest your desires with positive thinking pushed onto this image, etc. And Norman Vincent Peale kind of takes that and puts it into a Christian hermeneutic, so to speak, or pseudo-Christian hermeneutic. But he's also said on Phil Donahue that Jesus is not the only way to God, right? So this is like, this is Trump's, this is basically his favorite pastor. Remember, Trump's also the guy that says, basically says he doesn't have to pray for forgiveness. He doesn't have to ask for forgiveness. He just gets it right? And his selection for the White House, the Paula White, who was running the task force on faith, White House Faith Initiative. This is a woman who's sort of in that same kind of positive thinking milieu, sort of the New Apostolic Reformation type of New Age Christian. She was been at praised Mother Moon, who's at the head of the Unification Church, right? This is the Moonies, some young moon, who once upon a time, right, they basically say that they are the Messiah, the Moonies. So that kind of gives you a sense of like his brand of what if he believes in any kind of Christianity, that's basically the brand that he believes in. And he's also used the theosophical terminology. He keeps throwing around this golden age term, golden age, the golden age. Well, that's a theosophical term. It's often used synonymously with the age of Aquarius. He's not just thrown that word around. If you saw the AI music video, where it has the Trump Gaza, and one of the refrains is golden future, a brand new light. It's got images of a golden Trump idol, sort of it's some utopian new Gaza resort that's built on the ashes of Gaza. And he retweeted this video, right? I mean, so he retweeted a video that's using the term and has basically him as a golden idol. And then just the people around him these are basically his advisors. So Steve Bannon and Michael Flynn. So Steve Bannon, you can check out, there's an interview by a guy by the name of Benjamin Teitelbaum, spent a lot of time with Bannon in the Navy. And the way he explains it is that Bannon was thoroughly into esotericism, the occult, the New Age, etc. Anytime they would hit a port, and wherever various regions, he said he always had the best sort of occult bookstores mapped out, and that would be the first thing he would hit every time they'd hit a port. He was really into Gurdjieffianism in particular. So that's George Gurdjieff. He's basically the founding father of chaos magic. Mm-hmm. So when you see Musk and Bannon do is it a Nazi salute or is it a Roman salute? And then and he does the fight thing with it. Bannon does. Well, it's both and neither. It's chaos magic. It's not about whether or not they're signaling a fascist salute or a Roman salute. By the way, the German Fosky, the symbol for fascism, and axe and a bundle of sticks that comes from the Romans. So it's kind of a moot point. It can be both things, right? It's just two different historical iterations. But the point of them doing that isn't about signaling one versus the other. It's about having two halves of the country argue about an interpretation that can't be pinned down. The goal is to create the chaos around the moving goalpost that is, how you may or may not interpret the symbol. Now, another interesting thing to note is Marina Abramovich. This is the woman who's the famous yeah, the spirit cooker, right, with the Crowley stuff, right? Well, there's a video where she says that Trump is the ultimate chaos magician, and that he will bring in basically the new order, the new age, because he is the ultimate chaos magician. And someone like Michael Flynn, if you look at, I think it was at one of the Reawaken America tours, where he does a prayer to the Archangel Michael. And if you listen to it, this is not a Catholic prayer to the Archangel Michael. This is almost verbatim Elizabeth Clare Prophet's prayer to the Archangel Michael. Elizabeth Clare Prophet basically has started her own version of basically neo-theosophy. I think it's the Church Triumphant. I forget the Church something Triumphant. But it comes out of the I Am cult that the Ballards started back around World War II-ish. And when the New Agers are praying to archangels, it's really just sort of it's a syncretic version of an ascended master is one of the other phrases that they use. So it's basically theurgy, right? It's the channeling of angels, or Christians might consider those angels to be demons, but right, that's when you're talking about theurgy in the theosophical sense, or angel magic in the theosophical sense, right? This is not Christian, okay? And Michael Flynn, one more thing, we'll just put one more on the board, is that Michael Flynn, there's a lot of good research to show that he either is Q, as far as QAnon goes, or is deeply involved in the QAnon operation. Now, QAnon came out of Cicada 3301, which is this internet puzzle / alternate reality game that incorporated lots of new age and occult themes, right? And that's sort of and these are sort of riddled throughout, that alternate reality game sort of becomes the QAnon operation, by which you're sort of LARPing, playing this live action role playing game, and start trying to achieve some kind of higher spiritual enlightenment or some human potential by, following the Q clues and participating in this, the Trump movement to beat the deep state and all this type of stuff. So now Trump has never said that he avows Q. Is one of these. This is a good example of him acting like, when he's been called out, like, do you support these people or not? He won't disavow them. He won't affirm them either, but he will say, like, well, I know that they're against pedophiles, so that's good, right? And so it's like, he knows enough to know that he knows enough to know not to alienate them, but then acts like he doesn't know enough to actually be able to say one way or another, right? I think that's a chaos magic move, personally. And then if you just think that, this man's run for president has been in the making actually for a very long time. I know people, they like to think that he's a wild card that came out of nowhere, but Roger Stone has said many, many, many times that he's been trying to get him to run for president for decades. Oprah back in the day mentions it when he's on there, like, would you run for president? He was in the Reform Party at one point. And if there was ever a man that, if you want to say was, I guess maybe groomed or had, had some practice leading up to his rise to political power. This man was also the first person. He's basically the first big reality TV star. And I don't just mean The Apprentice. I mean WWE. Wrestling, right? Which is, it's not reality TV, but it's kind of the proto reality TV in the sense that, right? It's a work, it's a kayfabe, right? It's not a real competition, but it's being sold to the audience as if it is, right? And so it's sort of the proto reality TV in the sense that, right? We all know a lot of that stuff is scripted, right? It's supposed to look like it's sort of spontaneous, but a lot of that stuff is, if it's not scripted, it's carefully curated to elicit people to respond in particular ways. And social media, right? Social media is basically just a reality TV writ large, bringing in the general population to participate in the reality TV show through politics and other weird new age alternate reality games like the QAnon phenomenon. So all this stuff, there's too much around him. There's too many people around him that all fit the same bill. His family members go way back with it, and some of the people that he's around, their families go back with this stuff. And people have been trying to push him into this for so long that I can't imagine that he's not aware of it. If he's not aware, it's sort of a moot point, because if they're surrounded him that much and he's not aware, what he will be capable of doing would be the same as if he is aware and went along with it. Meaning, right, if you're unaware of it, you're not going to be able to do anything to not get manipulated by the deep state, right? To use the common parlance, right? So, I mean, that's how I would parse it.
Just a few quick questions before we wrap up, regarding some of the things that you said. So, you also talked about Peter Thiel. Do you know, and Peter Thiel being like a shadow president, do you know what Peter Thiel's worldview or philosophy is?
Well, I mean, Peter Thiel, if you saw, he recently, I guess about a year ago now, but it wasn't too long ago, that there's an interview at the Hoover Institute. And they're asking him, they're largely talking about sort of eschatology, right? Like end time scenarios. And he kind of, walks through some of the various kind of apocalypse mythos of various cultures and religions and this and that and the other. And within it is couched his discussion about the evolution of technology. And ultimately, if you want to boil it all down to a thesis, he's kind of suggesting that, maybe those end times apocalypse stories don't have to come true. Like maybe, right? So like as we evolve our technology, it will either it's sort of inevitably either will come true or somehow we will create this utopia, right? And so in other words, like in the second scenario, that's essentially conscious evolution. That's essentially what people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, which, by the way, conscious evolution is a theosophical term. And so for Barbara Marx Hubbard, basically, we can sort of cheat Armageddon by consciously evolving our technologies to, for sustainable development and, to make our bodies more efficient, right, et cetera. And so I would guess that, he doesn't explicitly say conscious evolution is sort of his worldview or his philosophy. But if you listen to the words he uses and sort of the crux of everything he's saying, I mean, that's essentially what it boils down to. So it's essentially more or less the same thing. But if you look at something also like, his company, so he names his company Palantir. Well, that's it's a reference to the Lord of the Rings. I can't remember specifically what it is. It's some kind of either magical crystal or device or something that can like see everything, right? Like it can see the whole, all the lands. Like it's kind of like a remote viewing magical device. I don't know if it can see in the future as well, but I know it can kind of see everything that's happening, right? So it's interesting that, you know, this guy that kind of believes that technology can basically be our savior, right? That we could become our own gods by evolving through technology and save ourselves from destroying the planet and ourselves. But then he toys with these esoteric, metaphysical, or rather occult kind of magical symbols or rather rhetoric surrounding it, right? Another example would be also So J.D. Vance, right, vice president, he his political rise to power was largely financed by Peter Thiel, but also he started a venture capital firm, Naria Capital, that was also bankrolled by Peter Thiel. And Naria is another, I can't remember. I'm not a big Tolkien guy. I mean, I like Tolkien, but I don't I don't know those books that well to remember all the different jargon terms and which magical creatures, etc. refers to. But Naria is another reference to a Tolkien, something in one of the Tolkien books. So again, you know, when they use, I mean, they could pick any word in the world, right? But they inevitably pick these words that somehow invoke sort of, you know, mystical, occult, magical, etc. So, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if Thiel also underneath all of his, you know, his empirics about technology and evolution is actually a more esoteric belief.
Right. Okay. You said earlier that Marina Abramovic mentioned Trump as being a master magician. I'm sorry if I butchered that.
Yeah.
That's crazy because I wouldn't expect her out of all people, you know, to even talk about Trump, but to say he's a magician. When did she say that?
Let me see. My publisher sent me this. This was during, I want to say it's during the first administration. And it wasn't like it was almost like I'm trying to put it. It was almost like it was almost like it's inadvertent, or right, like almost in some ways like he doesn't know. Like I believe the context of the conversation was she was talking with somebody, and they were like, "This is the worst thing that ever happened. Trump got in." She's like, "No, this is good." Because, you know, he's so bad that it's good, that he will create chaos, and that because he does all this chaos, that will, right, order out of chaos, right? So she almost discusses it like, well, here it's interesting. Maybe it relates to something that Bannon says quite often. He uses these phrases, and I know I study the occult enough to you know, to be able to decipher a lot of what they say, but I don't know enough to know exactly what they're saying all the time. But when you hear Bannon repeat certain phrases, you have to understand that it's like almost like sigil magic, like that phrase means something, and it's loaded, and he's repeating it for a reason. So he keeps referring to Trump as the man in time. And as opposed to, you know, and this is the days of thunder and flood the zone, all these types of phrases. But the man in time is juxtaposed with, I forget the other one I think is like the man out of time. He goes, watch the Benjamin Teitelbaum interview to get the particulars on this. Okay. But if Trump is the man in time, right, he just kind of is like existentially the instrument of the time. Right. Whether, you know, consciously or otherwise, like that's what Trump is going to do. He's going to create this chaos. But she says chaos magician. Let me just look real quick. You can edit this just a dead spot out for a second.
Yeah. I think I did find a clip on somebody's LinkedIn.
There it is. There's Chris. Numbers 27. Let's just go.
Yeah, Marina. When I found out about her, it was during the WikiLeaks, I think, scandal with the Podesta emails and yeah, and then I saw her in the Jay-Z video. I remember seeing her in the Jay-Z video, and I was wondering who she was. And then I started to look into her and saw the spirit cooking videos, and her attending parties with Lady Gaga, eating fruits or food off of naked bodies in I don't know if it was a coffin or something like that, just some art display. They were just eating food off people's bodies and all this craziness. But
yeah. I just found the thing, but the video doesn't work anymore. Apparently,
I think
but it's out there. I mean, you can find it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I found something. Now, as far as Elon Musk, I think you mentioned him wanting to have his satellites in space, but he wants to have some type of pattern, or you talked about some type of pattern that the satellites or this kind of grid that would be over the earth relating to how his satellites are set up, and they would be in a certain shape or something.
Yeah. Have you ever so there's something called a geodesic dome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you've ever seen a geodesic dome, there's a few of them out here in Illinois. People built them, but it's also known as a buckyball. It's called a buckyball because it was created by the design was created by Buckminster Fuller. So what a geodesic dome is, it's basically you create it's a structure, architectural structure, like a building. Hey, go on. Sorry, he's scratching. Can you hear him scratching?
No, I can't hear anything.
All right, you can cut this part. All right. Sorry, I'm making me lose my train of thought. Okay, so the buckyball it's basically you take a bunch of geometric shapes, usually triangles, but you could use pentagons or hexagons. It's usually triangles, and obviously you can make pentagons and hexagons out of triangles, but and you create a dome by piecing all these different angular geometric shapes, triangles, pentagons, hexagons, etc., together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the theory of it is that unlike traditional structures that have like a foundation, corner posts, pillars, and like all the weight kind of sits on like a foundation and a few like main posts or beams, that in a buckyball all of the weight is evenly distributed through each point on the grid. So at each point where the different angles of the geometric shapes connect is bearing an equal amount of weight. All right. Now, never really took off architecturally because, just in terms of like some of the my dad actually we repaired one time. Like usually shingle these things, and like it doesn't keep water out very well, and it's just not very efficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that the real goal of the buckyball, it's actually there's a deeper esoteric concept embedded in it, and it has more to do with creating cybernetic grids. Mm-hmm. So if you see a buckyball, right, as far as like a building, this is what the graphic representations of the Starlink satellite grid looks like floating around the Earth. So take the globe Earth and then basically wrap a buckyball around it, mm-hmm. or rather cover it with satellites and then connect the nodes of those satellites with those triangles or those pentagons or those hexagons, right? You basically create sort of an electromagnetic information grid that is shaped like a buckyball enveloping the planet. Now, for people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, that is the extended nervous system of human consciousness. So it's through those, right? Remember, he has on the other end of those satellites, that grid, he has his social media network. So he's able to basically get in all the data, all our thoughts and feelings, our behaviors, etc., writ large. Eventually, he'd like to plug in the neural link so you could basically also get the actual biometrics, right? The EEGs, the heart rate, right, data, etc., like that. All the neural data, along with the abstract social media data, right? All gathered together in his noosphere grid. But for Hubbard and the conscious evolutionaries and the theosophists, right, that this is the process by which we achieve conscious evolution. So our mind, right, the noosphere, the intelligence of the universe, right, comes to know itself through the human mind. The human mind expresses that through science and technology. The apex of the technology becomes cybernetics, and then through that cybernetic grid, we can now augment and enhance our own intelligence. We can fuse with the creations of our own hands, basically, right? Like idolatry on a whole nother level, right?
Yeah.
Like not a graven wooden image, right? But a graven, right, electrical image that we like not just worship, but like we basically submit, like give our entire beings over to and merge with. So that grid, that Starlink grid, looks exactly like the buckyball, which is essentially the sort of the theoretical version of the nervous system writ large. And one other thing I should note about that is the reason why I explained how the weight is distributed in that is because in the world of cybernetics, in the world of behavioral engineering, nudging, so to speak, the idea is that if you push on one of those nodes, right, that amount of pressure will equally affect all the surrounding nodes. So if you have somebody like a Trump, consider him one node on the grid, and all these other surrounding grids galvanize around him based on what he says or does, pushing on that node, right? Whatever he says or does sends out a signal to the nodes around him. And just in the world of, right, think about how that is expressed or manifest in terms of social media, right? Now you can push large groups of people around based on just playing with one of the nodes in sort of the, biopsychosocial cybernetic grid. So again, I mean, it could be a coincidence that structure kind of looks the same and that they're sort of into the same thing. But I would guess that it's, that all these things come together because, the futurists and the new agers, there was always a big overlap. A lot of the futurists might not have been into the esoteric and the occult, but they were into evolution by technological means, whether they thought there was some metaphysical aspect to it or not. So they've all been looking to this moment, and the empirics, again, whether or not it's a coincidence, right? It's another way that it basically lines up with the whole New Age movement.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's a good source to go to read about all of these occultic influences and learning about Trump's philosophy and his worldview? And I think I did read a portion of your book where it talks about Jared Kushner and his beliefs in I think Kabbalah, and I think you alluded to Trump possibly, I don't know, being influenced by rabbis that are into Kabbalah. But what's a good source to go to dig deeper into these things?
John Brisson, my friend John Brisson, has done a lot of deep dives into the occult, New Age sort of sphere surrounding Trump. He's done some good deep dives into, well, most of what I mentioned: Steve Bannon, Michael Flynn, QAnon. Another good, so that would be We've Read the Documents. That's a good site. And my friend Laura Schrocki, it's called the Magical Mystery Church. She always says, people, you might think that it's like a New Age thing, but it's not. It's exposing the magical mystery church. And she's done some deep dives on the New Apostolic Reformation, Paul White, and some of these people. So those both are my friends, and that's more their wheelhouse than mine, or they certainly go a lot deeper than I have. So other than primary source stuff, those would be good places to start. Yeah, those would be good places to start. Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, where do you think all of this is going?
Well,
What do you see in store for the next 3 years?
Well, I think that there's just, as far as education goes, I think we sort of covered the waterfront on that. More broadly speaking, well, there's two things that I guess I'm most concerned about. I guess a third one kind of connects, but one is war in the Middle East, and the other one is financial overhaul. Basically bringing it up in the crypto economy, blockchain sort of programmable money that's basically going to be hooked up to the social credit system.
Yeah.
So as far as the Middle East stuff, you mentioned that chapter on the Cabal and some of the rabbis around him, that he's been given the Prince of Peace Award in Israel. He's been put on the coin with Cyrus. On the other side. So, it's the King Cyrus, or Koresh, right, was the Persian king that let the Jews rebuild the temple in the Old Testament. And he's referred to as the Messiah because of that. So they're putting Trump on the juxtaposing him with the only other non-Jewish person that's been referred to as a Messiah in Jewish religious history, right? Sort of implicating that he's going to be like a Cyrus because he's perhaps going to rebuild the third temple for them, right? And you probably know that that's in Christian eschatology, right? Before the end times happen, before the Antichrist appears, the third temple has to be rebuilt. I mentioned the AI music video where talking about, making a utopia out of Gaza, et cetera. But he said that he's their greatest ally, et cetera. Most of the people he's picked are very, very pro-Israel, Huckabee for ambassador, Marco Rubio, who was voted in 99-0. Pete Hegseth, who, by the way, sounds like maybe is getting a lot of heat right now, maybe because he didn't want to do the strike in Iran that they were trying to get done. He has said things about rebuilding the temple, but what people might not think is that he's not just a military guy that's like an officer, he's seen he's actually done combat. So, as much as he'd like to rebuild the temple, he also, right, has a firsthand experience of, what war actually entails, and might pump the brakes a little bit just because he has a visceral sense of what he'd be signing people onto. Yeah. But otherwise, he was in the milieu of, right, let's basically finish our tour in the Middle East with our final opponent being Iran. And as war kicks off, that could be the other reason why I think that's on the table is because that would be a convenient reason to, but even before our lockdowns, the yield curve on the bond market was showing that, dollars plummeting, the economy's tanking, that's sort of, we've been hitting this bubble and then, printing money and doing this, that, and the other, for a couple since the housing crisis in 2008, the bubbles are, pretty much ready to pop. You can see that he wants to be the crypto. Trump is saying he wants us to be the crypto AI capital of the world. Mm-hmm. And he's put these various cryptocurrencies on, basically put them into a sort of a reserve status. So he's basically trying to, back our currency with crypto.
Right.
And, when, if you have a war, think about, lockdowns. We probably would have needed to print all that lockdown money just to, keep the economy afloat. But if we did that, if we didn't have the lockdown, you'd have to say like, yeah, kind of like we kind of mismanaged all that money again, right? And people are kind of getting tired of hearing that. So you have like, some kind of crisis. We're like, oh, look, so same thing. We have a big war. You can go, oh, well, it's not, it's not the tariffs. It's not, it's not all the derivatives over the years. It's not, it's got nothing to do with the way we've managed the economy. It's because of the war, right? And so those two things, if one doesn't cause the other, one is often used to mask the other. And I know that in the realm of education, my next article, I'm looking at how the education savings accounts, they want to use digital wallets like Class Wallet and Odyssey and platforms like that, which are looking into blockchain.
Right.
So in other words, right, like you could see, when RFK is wanting to regulate SNAP payments, right? Basically banning sugary drinks and things like that. Well, I've seen in Illinois where they've had similar proposals, and the way they wanted to do that was with programmable blockchain money. Gotcha. Right? So it was like you could only buy certain quote unquote healthy foods or healthy food tokens. Yeah. So I think that the two main things for the Trump administration, why he's the man of the hour, is they want to finish the situation in the Middle East, or at least ramp it up. They want to bring in a crypto economy, and he's going to act like, oh, he's going to save us from CBDCs, but he's going to bring in these other baskets of private coins. So it's like, right, it's kind of free market. It's not a central bank digital currency, but it's right, it's still a digital currency that's trackable, traceable, programmable, etc. And the third part that I said, which kind of goes with both of them, because with the programmable money, it comes along with the predictive analytics, the track and trace analytics that would be managed by like Palantir, et cetera. But as these things get ratcheted up, you're seeing a lot of, we're already seeing what I would consider sort of like a Gladio style event, Operation Gladio, where basically you have all these little pockets of what are being labeled as terrorism. Last I checked, vandalism isn't actually terrorism, but that's how we're moving the Overton window, right? So we're having, you've seen all the Tesla, attacks on Tesla vehicles, et cetera. And I guess if you burn down an electrical vehicle, or especially next to a plant, right? Those things aren't easily extinguished. And so, that's pretty dangerous. I don't know, maybe you're getting close to terrorism there, but I mean, if you spray paint it or key it, I don't think it's terrorism. But in the meantime, you're seeing these other like conservative pundits that have been like swatted, et cetera. So you're seeing, and if you watch conservative news, if you watch television news and you peek at it throughout the day, you see that there's like 3 or 4 kind of like main narratives that they want the public to kind of like swallow and like focus on. And I just keep seeing all the time, right? They just keep calling people terrorists, not just that do the things I mentioned, but if you even are suggesting things that, Trump is, becoming autocratic, or that, Musk is becoming autocratic, that you are participating in stochastic terrorism, which means that you might not do anything, but if somebody, some wackadoodle hears what you say and they're already on the edge and they go out and, key a Tesla car, that's your fault, right? And therefore you're a terrorist. That's the type
thought
of
crimes.
And now tie that in with, all the anti-Semitism stuff that's being stoked, both organically and astroturfed. And basically using that to, it's dovetailing with the deportation agenda, right? And so now if you're, last I checked, just being in a gang by itself, that doesn't make you a terrorist. I'm pretty sure, that terrorism laws for a long time. It's the first I've heard that basically every time, if you even have a tattoo that could be affiliated with the gang, right? You're a terrorist, need to be deported. If you're hearing a visa and you speak out against Israel, you're anti-Semitic and therefore you're a terrorist. That these deportation operations, right, where we're going to send. He's talking about putting people, American citizens. I call them the homegrowns. He says in these camps as well. So as that war kicks off, right? We've already set the precedent that we can deport people. As the war kicks off, it'll slowly move from immigrants to anti-Semites to mentally ill, which is another category of terrorists. And if they have the trackable, traceable, programmable money, maybe before they boot you and send you to El Salvador,
Right.
Maybe you just get your money turned off first. And then maybe if you're a good little boy or a good little girl, then we'll let you back into society and we'll deport you. But maybe, right, again, maybe we can use our predictive analytics, right, tracking and tracing all your purchasing habits in your social media to say that, if you think that Trump is a new ager, well, you must be mentally ill. And if you're mentally ill, you're potentially going to do something terroristic, which means, our predictive analytics say that, we're going to stop that before it happens. And we got a nice place for you in CCOP. So, and this is for to protect us from, from Iran at the same time, from Iran and gang members from El Salvador. I mean, I hate to lay it all out like that, but that's where I think they want to go. And so I would say that, between now and hopefully we've got some time.
Yeah.
I think it's important that people very carefully and civilly, because be careful with your rhetoric it's important to point these things out, speak up, and, but be careful about how you say it, because if you use the wrong verb, you know what I mean? The way that they're playing fast and loose with what could qualify you as a terrorist. Just be very careful about how you use your rhetoric as you approach that.
Yeah. I mean, it's very frustrating because you got to walk on eggshells, especially with these platforms. I don't even know what to say half the time. Like I got to self-censor myself and figure out different words to use, because some videos I've had have gotten taken off YouTube, and you just don't know what to say. But yeah, that was a lot. And man, I was gonna go have some ice cream today, but you just killed it. No, I'm joking.
You got double ice cream now. You gotta go get two servings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even more now. But thanks for your time, John. Where can go ahead and plug your work? Where can people find you? What are the best links for them to check out your work? And do you have any upcoming projects coming up?
So you can find all my stuff at schoolworldorder.info. It's got a link to the book that you can get at tryingday.com. It's also on Amazon. It's got links to social media. That's at Professor Taoist on X. And all my most recent articles are at Unlimited Hangout. I'm hopefully going to have my next article in the Trump Ed series done. I'm hoping by next month. And I got another piece on the final piece on my Barbara Mark Hubbard series. I was going to try to get that one done first, but hope that one hopefully the following month.
Okay. Cool, man. Well, thank you for your time again, and I'll definitely plug your work as well, and we appreciate you.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. God bless.
God bless.